Here in the presence of Washington and Lincoln, we honor those 20th century Americans who took up the struggle during the Second World War and made the sacrifices to perpetuate the gift our forefathers entrusted to us, a nation conceived in liberty and justice. World War II was the largest conflict in American history.
This was a case in which Western civilization itself hung in the balance.
16 million men and women volunteered or were drafted.
Everybody was contributing to the war effort at that time.
It was all about freedom and the future of the free world.
Nearly 400,000 Americans died to preserve our way of life. And yet, for more than half a century, no national memorial remembered their sacrifice. Now that has changed. This is the story of the World War II Memorial and the generation of Americans it commemorates.
Major funding for this program was provided by the Disabled American Veterans National Service Foundation, saluting the heroes of World War II and all who protect our heritage of freedom. DAV works to build better lives for disabled veterans and their families. And by Ford Motor Company Fund, celebrating a remarkable tribute to American courage, honor, and sacrifice. We are proud to join in sponsoring this presentation of the World War II Memorial, a testament to freedom.
It's been a long time coming, but the World War II Memorial has now taken its rightful place among the other great monuments in our nation's capital. Hi, I'm Tim Russert. This is not a memorial to war. Rather, it celebrates the unity of the nation during a conflict that engulfed the entire world. It pays tribute to citizen soldiers who placed themselves in harm's way in the Atlantic and Pacific theaters of engagement. It recognizes the critical contribution of Americans on the home front from every state and territory. It remembers the darkest hours of the war and the greatest victories. It honors those who made the ultimate sacrifice to restore freedom and end tyranny. But above all, this memorial preserves the memory of a vanishing generation of Americans who sacrificed their own self-interest for the greater good of the nation. This is their testament to freedom. The National Mall in Washington tells our country's story. But one great chapter was missing.
It took a long time to develop the World War II Memorial, primarily because the veterans returning didn't have much interest in being memorialized.
The men and women came home from the war. All they wanted to do was get back to work, get on with their lives.
The Vietnam Veterans Memorial broke the ice, and we proceeded backwards to the Korean War Memorial. I think all of a sudden people said, hey, what about World War II, the biggest event of the 20th century?
In 1987, a combat veteran named Roger Durbin asked his congresswoman why there was no memorial to World War II in the nation's capital.
I said, well, sir, I think there is a memorial. Iwo Jima. He said, wrong. That's to one service. He said, there's no World War II memorial. I thought, this is unbelievable.
With the 50th anniversary of the war's end approaching in 1993, Congress finally passed legislation authorizing a national memorial to the World War II generation.
It became obvious that soon there'd be no one left who had experienced the war.
It really became our task to take their story into history.
The flames of World War II were burning long before it touched American soil. Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler was overrunning Europe. In the east, the militaristic government of Japan had brutally invaded mainland China. America declared neutrality and clung to the hope for peace. Then came December 7th, 1941, the Day of Infamy.
It was a Sunday, and I was listening to the radio, and the announcer came on and said, Pearl Harbor is being bombed. And suddenly 3 aircraft flew right above us with red, brown dots.
But the noise woke me up from the bombs. And then the night nurse said, "The island of Oahu has been attacked by Japan." I said, "Shut up."
When the first torpedo hit, I didn't know it was a torpedo. I just knew whatever it was a hell of an explosion. I then went out and looked around and found the captain severely wounded. I got some first aid kits to get morphine out of them, but this was peacetime, and there was no morphine in the kit.
I can't remember the injuries except a leg amputation, and I thought, I don't know whether I can hold up under the sound of sawing a bone.
2,341 Americans died that day, many trapped below decks in watery graves.
The thought that lasts in my mind about Pearl Harbor more than any of the others is that it united the country.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Where do you begin to make a memorial to World War II? After a long search, sponsors were convinced it should be located between the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument, 2 of the most revered symbols of our country.
World War II was the defining event in the 20th century, just as Lincoln's preservation of the Union was a defining event of the 19th century, and the Washington Monument was the defining event of the 18th century. That is, the establishment of the United States.
This was a controversial decision because some believed that the main axis of the mall was architecturally complete. A coalition was formed to prevent any further building.
This has become the public gathering space, the marching place where we celebrate our freedom. The symbolic and the physical continuity will be broken.
It was the thought that the mall is so important that any change would somehow be wrong.
The design of the National Mall has changed many times since it was first conceived in 1792. The current boundaries were established by the Macmillan Plan early in the 20th century.
In terms of the siting of this memorial, my preference was for a site off-center, located in a grove of trees, the Constitution Gardens site, it's called. In the process of considering this, of touring the sites, I became convinced that World War II was such a major event that we shouldn't push it to the side.
What were we fighting for in the Second World War? What was all that about? It was about the values that are represented by the other 2 monuments.
The historic Rainbow Pool site at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial's reflecting pool was officially approved. But the struggle was just beginning. The surprise attack on Pearl Harbor shocked and angered the nation. Overnight, an army of young Americans swarmed into the recruiting stations.
Today, this is the spirit that is typical of all America. A scene that is being reenacted in every town, every city, every hamlet.
There was a tremendous patriotic feeling that swept across the country, and everybody just had one thought in mind, and that was to get in and take some part in it.